In this episode, I'm very excited to be joined by Kate Moryoussef, host of the ADHD Women's Wellbeing podcast, health and wellbeing coach, and EFT practitioner for late diagnosed neurodivergent women. I've been listening to Kate's podcast for nearly a year and have felt very seen and heard in the many informative and compassionate conversations she has had on there. We talk about the importance of self-care and regulating our nervous systems when we have ADHD, and how to make self-care and routine an easy and tailored priority for you as an individual. If you're a late diagnosed woman with ADHD feeling like you have to do it all, or having meltdowns over your inbox, we've been there too, and we discuss how and what has supported us and our clients. Thank you for tuning in to the Calm Your Nervous System podcast, where you will learn to regulate your nervous system, not just calm it. I'm your host, Jenny Adams, and I'm a somatic coach who has recovered from debilitating ME and trauma. Alongside my guest experts, I'm here to share tips, stories, and debunk jargon, what is somatics anyway, about how you can regulate your nervous system so you don't have to live with chronic illness, burnout, or debilitating trauma for the rest of your life. A joyful life is possible. So thank you, Kate, for coming onto the podcast. We were just having a chat beforehand, and it feels like I already know you because you've got such a wonderful podcast already. And I'd love for you to tell us a little bit more about what it is you do, how you got into this work. Yeah, why did you start your podcast as well?
Yeah. So what do I do? It's like the famous question, because I'm like, I always say, if you ever watch Peppa Pig, like if you've got young kids or you've ever watched it, like randomly, there's a character called Rebecca Rabbit, who I'm convinced has got ADHD because she has like a million jobs. And she'd like, one minute she's the digger kind of controller, the tractor driver. The next minute she's like teaching in the school and all of that. And I think that's kind of me a little bit. But I would say what everything underpins is my passion to help women and girls mostly. But I do speak to men as well about ADHD, late diagnosed ADHD, and help them, feel better, help improve well-being and lifestyle, and for people to finally thrive when they've not quite known what's been going on for them for so many years. So that's kind of the underpinning. And then I just have the podcast, I do coaching and workshops and writing and other things that are sort of brewing. And that's kind of, where I'm at. But yeah, I think just essentially is if you have or suspect you've got ADHD or you've been diagnosed, my kind of goal is to help more people feel better with that.
And I know for myself, I started listening to the podcast probably last spring, summer, and some of the conversations that you've had on there and the people that you've brought in, the information and the knowledge shared has been incredible. So thank you for creating that environment to share, because there are so many of us, myself included, that are late diagnosed women with ADHD, and we have gone our whole lives believing certain things about ourselves and having to mask and living in this, like you said, not thriving. Mm-hmm. And I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on, for anyone that's listening that is kind of questioning if they think they might have ADHD, and how does it show up in women differently to men?
So it's $1 million question, because I actually think ADHD shows up really differently for lots of people. And, for example, I've got 4 kids and all of them have had a diagnosis across the years since I was diagnosed, because we've kind of figured out that my husband's got it, but it presents quite differently. So we've kind of like hit the jackpot of ADHD in our family, where it shows up in all 4 kids really differently, but I know I can see the traits in different capacities, and I see it it's like a volume control where I always say it's like this analogy of like you've got bass and you've got treble, and the bass is slightly higher in one and the treble slightly higher in the other.
Yeah, I love that.
It's like a mixing desk of ADHD traits. But essentially, if we're talking sort of like girls, women, it's not what you would suspect. Yes, ADHD can show up in a very sort of typical way in girls. You can see, very hyperactive, energetic, lots of talking, hand gesticulating, that type of thing, where they desperately they've got a lot of external energy. But very often it can present with internal restlessness. So anxiety, worry, overthinking, ruminating, skin picking, nail biting, sleeplessness, anxiety, all these different things. And it may correspond with academia as well. So a lot of people sort of talk about, is ADHD just this trend and this is just coming out and all of that. And I don't think social media and TikTok and all this sort of short form content where it's just like constant helps. It may be triggering it to kind of come out a little bit more, but I definitely know that ADHD is there. You can see it in childhood in different manifestations, and it sort of evolves and mutates and changes. And for girls, especially because it's hormone related as well. So when we understand ADHD, we understand it's a dopamine sort of, it's not even a deficiency, it's a fluctuation, which is why you have some days where you're really high mood, high energy, and then other days where everything just feels hard, like you're just trudging through mud and you really can't even get out of bed or have a shower or have a conversation. So what I'm trying to maybe say is it can look different every day. It can feel different. And when we have hormones playing, so it can look different through puberty, prenatal, postnatal. It can look different perimenopausally, and it also can look different, post-menopause. But also every single month, we've got hormones, we've got periods, and we've got these menstrual cycles which are impacting our mood and the dopamine levels. So, and remember, this is only just being understood. That's the crazy thing, is that we're only just getting doctors, specialist doctors, not the GP, specialist doctors who are validating and doing the research. And we've now got a little bit of evidence to prove that estrogen is connected to our dopamine, or dopamine's connected to our estrogen. So when we've got lower estrogen towards the end of our cycle, our dopamine levels are going to fall lower as well. That means our ADHD symptoms are going to come to the foreground. And that's the same with perimenopause as well, which is a lot of women who are feeling that their ADHD is no longer manageable. And that is why we're hearing a lot of women sort of in their 40s being diagnosed with ADHD. I know that's very convoluted, but it's so complex and multi-layered, this situation. It's important that people understand that.
Yeah, and this is an ADHD-friendly space. I assume we are both ADHDers, seeing as we are living in this space. And I say to all my clients, and I say to any podcast listeners, these conversations are going to go down random rabbit holes and we're going to go off on different tangents, and that is totally welcome. So thank you for that. And there's a couple of things in there that you mentioned that I'd love to speak about and hear a little bit more about. And I'm sure you've probably heard this. You touched on it around the screen time and the TikToks and the videos. And we are living more and more in this society where, we are on the go a lot. We are living in front of screens most of the day.
Yeah.
And a lot of these apps are designed to keep us on them for as long as possible. And they've got very clever people, marketing psychologists behind them that are trying to keep us on them. This idea of ADHD is just caused by too much screen time. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So we know that ADHD is a neurodevelopmental condition. So that means that there's a lot going on in the brain with ADHD, but it also impacts our nervous system. It impacts inflammation, like I said, hormones. It's a full brain-body experience. And we are seeing this more and more when we notice that people are more neurodivergent. People have got hypermobility, gut issues, more prone to migraines, chronic pain, long COVID. So we're understanding that it's not just a brain thing, it's a full sort of nervous system, brain body kind of condition. However, if we're thinking about the apps, what they're doing is it's like constantly doing things to our brain, dopamine, we're seeking the dopamine, we're getting the dopamine. what it's doing to our nervous system, I don't even think we know, but it's putting us in this hypervigilant fight or flight state, probably most of the day, where we're constantly going through, and I'm speaking from experience here, checking Instagram, LinkedIn, emails, TikTok, Twitter, Facebook, however that all manifests, and especially when very often we're working for ourselves, we're entrepreneurs, we are business owners, whatever that looks like. So actually, being on LinkedIn, being on Instagram is part of our, our business. Like we have to be on, but being on has big consequences. And we see a lot of, especially sort of neurodivergent business owners suffering from burnout. So there's all these interconnections that we have to be aware of. I wish I had all the answers. I'm trying to figure it all out myself as well. But we just have to be aware. We have to really, really be aware, whether that is we just say, right, from 11 till 12, I'm going to check all the apps, and then I'm going to put my phone away until 6 p.m. And then I'm going to do 2 checks a day, answer all the messages, do what I need to do. But we've still got this problem where the algorithms are based on interaction and engagement. And it rewards us the more we're engaged, the more we're answering people and all of that. And it's really hard. It's kind of like fighting. We're fighting upstream at the moment with all of this. And I wonder and I hope that the tech companies are going to be held responsible for the huge mental health crisis. And I don't think there's any coincidence that the rise in anxiety and burnout and mental health problems is connected to the rise in so much presenteeism online. So we have to kind of make a bit of a stand. And I'm trying to figure out those answers myself, but I think awareness is probably key.
Yeah, and I'm glad you've brought all of those things together, and I can hear, there's a lot here, there's a lot to figure out. And I think the more experience we have with talking to others with ADHD, and so many of us have been on these journeys, and mine included, for anyone who hasn't heard any of my earlier episodes, and for you here as well, Kate, my own experience was undiagnosed ADHD until the age of 33. I am 33 now. Only got diagnosed very recently. A history of trauma, burnout, kept pushing, for this internal message that I'm not enough and I need to do more and I need to prove myself and I'll feel better when I've finished the thing. And we never finished the thing.
Never.
And just kept going and going and going, completely disconnected from my body. And I almost pushed through burnout to the point of getting very, very ill with ME, CFS, and spent years in a wheelchair throughout my 20s. And it was like, when we do things, we do things hard, right? I definitely went to the extreme end. And I see this a lot in a lot of my clients. And there's also the hypermobility and the sensitive nervous system and the allergies. And there's all of these things that are, that's not just me that's been through this. Yeah. I was only speaking to someone this morning who's trying to figure out, all of these random weird symptoms. And I said, are you hypermobile? Don't know. But that's another link of, okay, if there's constant fatigue, for example, just being hypermobile. And I didn't realize for years, a Pilates teacher diagnosed me with recognized hypermobility. Our muscles have to work so much harder because our ligaments don't work as they should to hold our joints in. So just baseline existing, we're more tired. And then we add some ADHD in, and then we add the trauma of living in a society that doesn't support us. Like, no wonder we're exhausted.
Yeah. 100%.
It's hard work.
100%. It is. And when you say it like that, you kind of think, like, of course, that's why people are so burnt out. And that, what you mentioned then, this sort of like restless motor of like, you just need to do a bit more, just keep doing it. And when you relax, and you finally say, right, I need to rest and relax, and to switch that kind of like part of your brain that's telling you to be more productive and do more, and you've still not done enough. It's really, really hard until we understand that there's sort of, a dopamine kind of fluctuating problem going on, where inconsistency, and sometimes we only know when to stop when our body physically stops. Like, it's horrific what happened to you, to be in a wheelchair in your 20s. Unfortunately, you're not the first person I've heard in that situation where chronic fatigue and mystery illnesses and things like that, kind of inflammatory autoimmune conditions sort of come in alongside the burnout, alongside the trauma, alongside the pushing, the constant pushing. But as awful as it all is, and we always have to, validate it and never dismiss what we've gone through, I think when we come out and have this awareness, we really can make changes. And when we can recognize how it shows up, and we can almost be one step ahead. And maybe just being one step ahead is putting on, like an email out of office. For me, that was like massive. That was so I can tell people I don't need to answer their email at 8 p.m. or my Slack. I can turn my notifications off between, 6 p.m. and 8 a.m., something like that. It's like, wow. But those are energetic boundaries our nervous system feels. And it is all about our nervous system. I really do believe that, because our nervous system is the motor, or I wish I had the medical word to explain it, but it is what is driving us. So if we can help create a more grounded, connected, calmer, more regulated nervous system, where we feel safe, then I think things feel better and our inflammation reduces. And it's a big deal to have the awareness, I think.
Yeah, and I remember a few years ago, if someone had mentioned the nervous system to me, I'd be like, what? I'm just exhausted. What's that got to do with anything? And having this understanding, and this is the Calm Your Nervous System podcast, and it's all about regulating your nervous system, because just like every piece of information that goes on around us goes through our nervous system, and our nervous system is then talking to all the other systems in our body. So how can we ignore this? It's so big. And we are constantly going in and out of these different states in our nervous system. And it's how flexible can we be? How easily can we move in and out of those states? So we're not just constantly in that fight or flight, or in that shutdown, which is the case for a lot of us. And I'd love to hear a little bit more about how do you manage? What are the strategies that help you, and how do you help regulate your nervous system?
Yeah, I 100% concur that for me, learning about my nervous system was probably one of the most pivotal moments in my life, because I didn't understand that it was my nervous system that was running the show. And I'll never forget, I probably put a post out on my Instagram about 3 years ago, just as I was beginning, things were sort of I just started the podcast. So maybe it was about 2.5 years ago. And I was coaching and I was working with people. And I just put this really simple post up saying, does anyone else think that your nervous system is completely interconnected with your ADHD, and that you just feel like you live in this hypervigilant state the whole time? And I literally got 50 people reply straight away going, yes, yes, like you've just articulated something that I didn't even know was a thing. So that's when my interest was piqued, and I was already trained to be an EFT practitioner. I was in the process of my training, which is tapping, which actively calms your nervous system. It's telling you that you're safe, that you're grounded, you're working with the meridians in your body, but you're also working with the amygdala in your brain, which is sort of the fight or flight part of your brain that tells you whether you're in sort of danger mode. And we're sort of trying to regulate and calm that. And then I did training with Deb Danner, who is the polyvagal sort of expert, global expert. And I did this week-long course with her, which was just profound. And when I understood the nervous system through polyvagal theory and understanding the ladder and all things like that, I've then simplified it for a lot of my clients and simplified it for, workshops and things. But I was looking at through this ADHD lens, and she never really talked about neurodivergence as such. It was just it was educating therapists and coaches and people about, the nervous system and how it can show up, on our daily life. And then I realized if I didn't actively, on a daily basis, step into methods and ways to calm my nervous system, I would be on this brink of dysregulation, chaos, anxiety, inflammation, however that looked like for me. So for me, my daily mantra genuinely is, right, yes, I love my work, I'm very passionate about everything I do, but how am I going to make sure that I ground myself, I feel regulated? What can I do to help myself, like, every single day? Because it's just not an option. It's just not an option for me to not have that anymore, because I can see, and also because I work with so many people and speak to so many people on the podcast where they've told me their horrendous stories of burnout and breakdown and illness and long autoimmune conditions, which I know are related to probably like a nervous system crash. So that has been a pivotal moment for me to be like, I prioritize my nervous system over probably everything I do, because then I can parent better, I work better, I sleep better, I'm a better wife. So that's the top of my kind of daily priority list. And it changes each time. Like, it doesn't have to be like a whole big thing to calm you and regulate your nervous system. It can be some breath work in the morning. It can be not going on your phone first thing. It's been making intentional choices about my caffeine, hydration, getting outside, moving my body, not doing back-to-back meetings, hot baths with magnesium salts, taking magnesium, saffron. Like, I really, really do walk the walk with this, walk the talk, because I can't not. I have to. It's just it's a no-brainer for me.
Yeah, and thank you for sharing those things that you do, because they can be regulating practices, but they're also just day-to-day looking after ourselves. And I think a lot of us ADHDers we want the quick fix. We're like, just give me the answer, and that's it. And it is just allowing things to slow down a little bit, and it's what is the priority. So for me, like, I have an office that's in the next town over from me. I park 10 minutes away up a hill, so I have to walk down the hill through a lovely park every day, and that is my time to regulate, bilateral stimulation. I'm walking, and that's my 10 minutes in the morning to say, what do I want to focus on today? What's important to me? How do I feel? I've probably checked in already with how I feel that day anyway. Okay, what is important? Before I go and turn my computer on, I will write down what is, here's my little list of the stuff I need to do today. And then that is what I focus on, because otherwise, and this is where I feel like the overwhelm comes in, you open your emails, you open Instagram, you look at your to-do list, and then you just go, oh, fuck, it's too much. And then we shut down. And that's when we'll go, oh, I'll just pick up my phone and just go on Instagram for a while. Or I'll go and clean the house because I don't want to look at my emails. And then we procrastinate because our nervous system has been triggered into too much. Can't do it anymore.
Totally.
So for those of us listening that recognise that we're ADHDers, are probably new to nervous system regulation and understanding the polyvagal ladder as well. What are some of those small, simple things that people can start with that don't feel too much? Like, I know you mentioned breath work, but that requires a bit of understanding what breath work is, etc.
Yeah. I think, for me, simplicity is everything. It really is. I mean, I would say that everything I do is like, right, how can I break this down? How can I make it more simple? Not only for me, but maybe for my kids, but clients, and when I'm doing workshops, anything like that. Like, I'm not a medic. And I think that when we hear about nervous system regulation, it can sound very like, clinical sometimes. And it's like, right, how can we make this simple for people so it just feels like a very sort of easy, effortless thing to do every single day? And like you say, you chose to do that walk. You could park outside your office and like race into your office with, a few minutes to spare before a meeting and heart palpitating, and you've got a thing of coffee, and you start your day in that kind of like frenzied state. And that is basically saying to your nervous system, do not relax. You're not safe. You have to be like fight or flight, hypervigilant, because you're starting the day already in that kind of that state. So we can just make those choices. Like you made that choice, walking. You understand the bilateral stimulation, which I love. Just having that knowledge that moving our hands, side to side, being outside in nature, does things to our eyes and anything like that. Like we can subconsciously, there's so many things. So try and find the things that work for you. Some people just like a morning stretch and a minute, 2 minutes of breath work. Some people like a cold shower and, the cold exposure really helps them. Some people like to start the day with a yoga class or a hot water and lemon, and they just have a bit of a mindful moment. It's not prescriptive. It's right. What works for you? Right. Let's tune into what works for you. What feels good? What feels effortless? What doesn't feel like a whole big like inauthentic thing that I have to pretend to be a holistic wellness influencer when actually I really don't want to do that. If you love your morning cup of tea, like I need caffeine in the morning. I do, whether it's good or not for my nervous system, it gets me out of bed, and I have to get out of bed. But that cup of tea, which my husband very kindly brings me every morning at like 10 to 7, because he knows that that's how I get out of bed. But I could spend it scrolling on my phone, and sometimes I do, and I'm like, oh, why have I done that? But sometimes I'll sit there and I'll open the bedroom window and I'll hear the birds and I'll hold my tea and I'll just take some breaths and I'll drink my tea. And that, for me, that 5 minutes is that moment where I just check in. But the long-term approach, the sustainable approach, which is what we need. We don't want the quick fixes. We want things that feel easy. Is right. Let's find ways, like you say, that walk to your car, that just feels like a really nice way. So before and after work, you get that decompression time. I love a bath. Like some people hate a bath, but I genuinely love a bath. So
Same.
I make my bathroom this little sanctuary, and I always make sure I've got bath salts and oils and nice books and candles. And I really prioritize that. But what I've really learned now is my diary, and not overcommitting and not saying yes and telling people that I'll get back to them, because I don't want to upset people. I like to people please and I don't like to offend people. But I'll look at my diary and be like, no, I can't have all those plans in my diary. I can't have all those meetings. So that's a very intentional way of protecting your nervous system. So I would say, if anyone's listening now, just to write down some things that they think intuitively is protecting your nervous system, is regulating and calming it. And then be like, well, can I choose those like 2 things or 3 things a day that I can do, or 2 things a day, and build on that and see how that feels, and see what kind of difference that has, that ripple effect through your week, through your month, and see if it makes a difference, because I can guarantee you it probably will.
And I love that you have just offered that invitation to find what feels intuitive to you. And I don't think this is said enough for us, well, for everyone. We are so individual, and when you've met one person with ADHD, you've met one person with ADHD. Like you said about your kids, how they're all so different. And I think when we've grown up having this, living in a world that doesn't support us and doesn't always accept us, we can question ourselves and what feels right for us, because someone's told us we need to do this, but someone else says we need to do that. And I know for myself, morning routines, and I'm sure I'm not the only one, have been a struggle. And I've mentioned this to various mentors and coaches that I've worked with before I realised I had ADHD. And they've just said, you just need to get up early, you need to like do half an hour of movement, and then you need to have like a protein fueled breakfast, and get yourself organised and get outside. And I'm like, oh my God, that sounds like so much effort. And then when I try it for a couple of days, I'm like, okay, but it doesn't quite feel right for me. It's too much work. And then it doesn't happen. And then they're like, how'd you get on? And then you go into the shame spiral of, well, I couldn't do it. Well, why not? I don't know. I just couldn't. And when we can find those things that work for us, and like you've just said about your morning routine, I think that is so important, because we are listening to ourselves. And I know for me that this like inner rebellious teenager, that as soon as I feel like someone's telling me to do something, I'm like, fuck you, I'll do what I want. As soon as there's a tiny bit of pressure or a little like should, I'm like, nope, not going to do it. Even if I was going to do it anyway, don't want to do it. So if there's any of that in there, And I've really softened into, well, actually, if I wake up and have a cup of tea and have caffeine straight away and pick up my phone, I don't have a good day.
Yeah.
And I am recognizing that. And people have been telling me that for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, okay, I've got the evidence myself now.
Yeah.
This doesn't support me that well, because when I start my day on my phone, I spend the rest of the day just chasing that same, oh, that was interesting, that was exciting.
Yeah.
And it's horrible, it's uncomfortable. Whereas when I let myself warm up a little bit, look outside, spend some time with my cats, interact with my partner, have a decent breakfast, and even just getting up and having, like, I have a 30-40 second cold shower in the mornings, and having a shower in the morning and then having a cold blast afterwards, that is like, yes, I did a thing. That's the dopamine hit, as opposed to the 5-second video and then you just chase and chase and chase for the rest of the day. And I'm not telling people that they need to go and have cold showers, but I have strangely worked out that that is one of those things that actually works for me and has boosted my immune system as well.
Yeah, that's brilliant. I think it's really interesting that you notice what is hard and what's easy, because for someone, they could get up in the morning really easily and do some of the things that your coaches told you to do, but they couldn't have a cold shower in the morning. Like, that's just like absolutely not. So it's not, there's no good, there's no bad, there's no sort of, if you do this, then everything's really good. And if you do that, then that's terrible. It's just find the balance that works for you. And I think you're right that we do like this sense of autonomy. So sometimes, unfortunately, we have to figure things out the hard way. And we can have the coaching and the mentoring and all the help. And that's really, really good. But on the whole, from what I've noticed with ADHD, we kind of have to figure it out ourselves, what feels good to us. It can take a long time. Like, I'm speaking to women in their 50s and 60s who are finally saying, so it's okay that I don't start work till 11 o'clock. Like, that's okay. They're needing permission. It's like, well, yeah, because if you're still getting the same amount of work done between 11 and 5, then why shouldn't you work those hours? Or 11 and 3, or you only work 3 days a week, and that's fine. It's that sense of autonomy that we need, but we might just need a little bit of a nudge, a bit of support, a bit of accountability along the way. So I lived for years absolutely in self-doubt and constantly second-guessing myself and feeling something felt right, but then I'd look outside and no one else was really doing it that way. So I'd then gaslight myself to be like, well, no, you can't do that. That's not right. Mm-hmm. So it's a massive invitation I would give to anyone listening is trust yourself, like really trust that you do know yourself better. And the sad thing is that we're in still structures and ways of doing things and archaic kind of ways in education and even employment and how life should be domestically, and all these things, these structures are very outdated that we're still having to fit into. So I'm noticing that things are changing, but definitely not as fast as we're getting the awareness about our neurodivergence. It feels like there's like a mismatch of what's like. I think what's happening is that, yes, we're all getting this awareness. It's slowly trickling down to sort of doctors and, the medical professionals, not fast enough. But then we're still hit by the constraints in education system and kind of like employment. So we just kind of like have to hold on and trust ourselves that if we feel that it doesn't work for us, but we know what does work for us, we might have to be quite brave and maybe do things that are, we consider like outliers and, whatever, you want to call it. But yeah, I would say trust yourself.
Yeah. And I think that's why so many of us will go and start our own businesses and become self-employed, because living in that masked shame world of, there's something wrong with you for just being you, and the struggle to show up. And like, one of the things I struggle with is keeping on top of my inbox. And if I get any really long emails asking me to do lots of things, I just, no, too much. So we're getting married. Well, actually, by the time this episode comes out, I might be married. We're getting married in March. And our wedding planners have sent through this huge list on email of what music do you want? How many people are going to be there? What food do you want? Like, she was just so much stuff. I got through half of it, and I read the line, "Who's going to walk the bride down the aisle?" And I lost my dad when I was 13. So that was a big, hit to me. And I just went, nope, too much. There's obviously a trigger in there, but just the mass of that email. And this is about something I'm really excited about. Like, I'm getting married in St. Lucia. And that is this email that I'm like, I'm going to look at that another time because it's too much. But I know that about myself now, that because I run my own business, whenever I'm working with a team or anybody, I will now say and have the autonomy to say, actually, if you send me a really big email, I'm not going to reply, or I'm going to get my VA to do it. Or could you WhatsApp me, or can I voice note you in response to this email? Because
that's my go-to 100%. I was going to say to you, if that was me, I would turn around to the wedding planner and say, I can answer all of this, but can I do it while I'm walking the dog, and just voice note you? And most people should be able to say, I've had a very similar situation. I got a questionnaire thing for a service that I'm signing up to, and they wanted so much information from me, like hours of information. I'm thinking, I haven't got time for this. So there's going to be a problem there. But I don't have that shame anymore. I would have probably forced myself in some way to deliver. But now I'm going to go back to them and say, you do know I've got ADHD, so this is not going to come as a surprise, but I'm going to find this really tricky. So there's a few options. Can we break it down? Can we discuss it in a meeting? Can I voice note or transcribe it? Do it on Otter and then get it transcribed and then send it to you. We were talking about tech before. Yes, there's all these negatives and downsides, but I think AI and tech and things like that and transcription services are going to be our friends, and we need to embrace that for sure, because we hit so many blocks. And I actually think that we should be celebrating a lot of this technological advance, because for me to then be able to see a whole kind of idea and see it manifest in the future, but then what holds me back are those little steps to get there. And that typically would have stopped me from doing something which I know would be amazing. Now I can think, well, I can ask AI, like, how can you break this down for me? Can you show me the steps? Can you help me? And so there's all these different ways that we can lean into that to help ourselves. But we can also not be shy and not be kind of like, sort of tiptoe around the subject and say, actually, I've got ADHD and this for me is really difficult. I can offer the same answers, but I might have to do it in this way and present it like that. And I don't think that's a bad thing.
And generally, most people have good intentions and they want to help if you ask for help. And I know for me in my corporate career, just the idea of getting stuck on an email and then having a shutdown, because then I go into like, well, am I stupid? Why can't I do this? This is something simple. What's going on? Why is this such a block? And then I spend my whole day freaking out about answering an email rather than just saying, actually, can I have a chat with you about this? Or can I voice note you? Or could you make this smaller for me, please? And then instead I've wasted an entire day freaking out because I didn't feel like I could actually speak up. And I think that can be the case for so many of us. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on, we talked about self-care and putting our needs first. And for those of us that are very much hyper-independent, don't want to ask for help, and as you said, you talk to these people, you've seen the burnout, you've seen where this goes. What would you say to those people?
Well, I am that person. That is me. I'm the hyper independent, don't ask for help, do it all myself, people pleasing, control freak, whatever you want to call it. And it's exhausting. It's genuinely crippling and it's overwhelming. And our nervous system is constantly in this teetering phase of kind of hypervigilance and shutdown and desperately trying to calm, but it can't calm. And so we're just on the whole time. And I would say, because I'm still learning this myself, is that it's okay to ask for help. And actually, as my business is growing, my team's getting bigger, and I'm having to learn a new skill of delegating, but also learn this new skill of it's okay for me to say to somebody, I don't love what you've just done. Would it be okay if you kind of like tweaked this and changed that, instead of my default going, well, I'll just do it myself. I'm just going to have to do it myself because no one else can do it as well as me. And knowing that I'm not going to hurt someone's feelings, or everything's going to be awful if I ask someone to change something. So I'm leaning into like this whole new muscle of being okay with not doing it all, and also being okay with it not being perfect, and learning that even though maybe we've been conditioned for whatever reason, growing up, in our families and however that looked, is that we don't have to maintain that same position. We don't have to be that interdependent person that is just saying, right, I have to just do it all. We can lean on other people, and actually showing that vulnerability, it allows other people to soften and open up with you, and you can help them, where they struggle. So it's really, I've noticed that things feel easier and things feel less scary and urgent and overwhelming when I just open up and ask for help and know that I can't do it all. Like I just can't do it all, and be okay with that now.
Yeah. And that leaning into the allowing and acknowledging that can feel really scary sometimes if we haven't grown up being able to ask for help the first time we do. And it might not necessarily be, I'm really struggling, help me. It can just be, actually, can you break these steps down with me? Or can you be in the room and chat to me whilst I'm folding my washing up?
Yeah.
That sort of thing. It's not the cry for help necessarily. And something I heard recently, I can't remember where, it might have been on your podcast, this idea that women now can do anything, and therefore we get confused and we think we can do everything. So we try and do it all. And it's too much. Like no one can do it all. And we're not going to get some badge of honour for saying, oh, I only had 3 hours sleep last night and I've done a gazillion things. No, you're going to get ill. And please don't live like that. Life is not about that.
Yeah.
And the delegating, I've certainly found for myself, being able to lean on a team, it means the thing that I'm good at, I can focus on.
Yeah.
I'm not fantastic at getting back to people on emails. My VA is fantastic doing that. I am good at supporting people with their nervous system and ADHD, not answering emails. That's where my focus goes.
Yeah.
So otherwise, we spread ourselves too thin, don't we?
100%. And to have that acknowledgement and that recognition is really powerful, because again, if we're, a business owner, again, we've maybe made that recognition that we don't want to be, working in an office and with the team and answerable to other people. But that also comes with its, difficulties and challenges of, okay, so I'm my own boss and I can pick and choose my own hours, but actually I still have to do all these things that maybe someone else in my team used to do, back in the office. So we have to make that understanding that it's really important that we do focus on our strengths, because with ADHD, we have so many amazing strengths, but we also have challenges. And when we try and overcompensate for the challenges, so much energy goes in there that we're not left with energy to do all the stuff that we're really good. And then our self-criticism comes in because we're spending so much time trying to do the thing that we're struggling with. And then we kind of, well, what am I good at? Like, what can I do? And we forget, we totally forget that we're brilliant, innovators and big picture thinkers and idea, creators and all of that. And then we've got empathy and everything, but because we're consumed with emails and tech and social media and audience growth and newsletter management and all that stuff, which we unfortunately have to do, we forget how great we are. So I would say, if you want to remember how great you are, delegate, because it is always worth the investment, because then you make space and time to then go back to why you're doing the thing that you're doing. And I've had to learn all this the hard way.
Yes. A lot of us have, unfortunately. But yeah, that is so important. And yeah, I would just love to hear, as we finish, as you mentioned the strengths, like what are your 3 favourite things about yourself and your journey, your neurodiverse brain?
I am definitely a bit of an ideas machine, I would say. I've always got ideas, but sometimes a bit to my detriment, because then I want to do them all. So I have to actively speak to myself and say, that's a great idea, but maybe it's for someone else, or maybe that's for further down the line. Maybe it's not right now, or that's a great idea, but let's sit on that because next week you might not have that same energy for it. So I have to kind of almost manage that part of me, even though the idea generating is really fun. I feel like I'm probably very intuitive. I can really feel what's right. I can feel people. I can feel energy, and I can trend spot. I think I can see what works in the future and I just know if it's a no, it's like a full body no. And if it's a yes, I'm kind of like, ooh, I want to learn more about that. Like I can feel it in my body. And then I think I'm really enthusiastic and I have a lot of energy for what lights me up. And I have zero energy. I've realized now that my ADHD helps align. It's kind of like gives me a bit of a spotlight, like a torch to what I really enjoy. And instead of lambasting myself for not enjoying or liking to do things that other people like to do, of like, why don't you like to do that? Like other people like that, you should be doing that, or you should be doing more of this. I've learned to drop the shoulds, and I've just kind of followed that kind of like ADHD flashlight of when you follow that, things fall into place. Like life feels good, you're having fun, you're enjoying yourself, you're energized, you're fulfilled. So it's that trust that even though it doesn't look like what other people are doing, and it might be weird to other people, and other people might not understand what you're doing, or they don't have an explanation or a title, at least if it feels good to you, just keep doing it, because that's why we see such great innovation with neurodiverse brains. Like we see that they're the ones, even though they're considered a bit weird and a bit sort of on the periphery of society or all these different things, they are making big change. So if that is you, you might not be that person. Like you really might not. You don't have to be an innovator if you've got ADHD, but you might do things slightly differently to other people, whether that is being at home with your kids, folding the washing in a certain way, or the way you work, or the way you exercise, or what you eat, or how you eat, or when you eat. Like all of this, if it works for you and you're feeling healthy, alive, fulfilled, energized, happy, then maybe you're doing things the right way for you, and that's okay.
Yeah, I love finishing on that. And just to add one more thing, when we are in that space of the joy and we're doing things our own way, and it might look a bit weird or different, but people see that and they're like, what have you got? I want some of that.
Totally.
And then, we magnetize the other people that are like, well, I don't care. Like I'm in an office block and I'm walking around in a pair of joggers covered in cats, and everyone else here is in professional office attire, and I'm like, I don't care. I'm comfortable. And it's being in that space where you're like, I can just be myself, and that's okay. And other people can see that and go, I'm curious. I want to know more. And then you find your fun people, and then you're like, oh, life can be amazing.
I love that. It's great. Yeah, 100%. And that's it. We might just be modeling to the people who are sort of 2 years behind us, who are the version of us, a year ago, 2 years ago, that just needs like a little bit of a kind of, ooh, like what's going on there? Like what's she got that I feel a little bit aligned to, but I'm not sure what it is. So yeah, I would say authenticity, just leaning into your own authentic self will always, it'll always pay off. I really do believe that.
Yeah. And what a great note to finish on. So thank you so much for coming onto the podcast. And if anyone is looking for where they can find you, hear more, you have a book coming out very soon. Where would we find you?
That potentially, I hope by the time this is out, will be available to pre-order. It's the ADHD Women's Wellbeing Toolkit. And that is based on all the conversations I've had on the podcast, which is the ADHD Women's Wellbeing podcast, broken down into lots of practical daily strategies and help and support, all done very compassionately, very softly, no expectation, just to help guide you through whether it's a self-diagnosis of ADHD or, a diagnosis, or perhaps you're waiting for a diagnosis and desperate for more support. And you kind of like in this holding bay of, what do I do? I may or may not have ADHD. I don't think you can go wrong by reading this book and really gaining some accessible lifestyle and well-being strategies and tools and help to help make life feel a bit easier. So that's all there. And then we've got the podcast and loads of resources on my website, which is adhdwomenswellbeing.co.uk. So if you just Google that, ADHD Women's Wellbeing, hopefully you'll find everything that I'm doing right now.
Amazing. Thank you. I cannot wait to read the book. And we'll put all the links to those in the show notes below. So have a little nosy, and thanks again for coming on.
Thank you, Jenny. Really enjoyed that.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Calm Your Nervous System. I hope you found the conversation as interesting as I did. If you would like to start healing your nervous system, I have a free energy diary available just for podcast listeners, which will really help you see your blind spots about how you're spending your time and your energy. Find it at jennyadamscoach.co.uk/podcast. Find out more about me and somatic coaching in the show notes below. See you next time.